COVID-19 shut down the world practically overnight. And as we locked down, some of our dirtiest industries disappeared, sending carbon emissions crashing deeper and faster than at any point in history. But a lot has happened while we were looking the other way. And what happens now as the world reopens? Could COVID-19 actually help save the planet? The answer to that question starts with coal. It's the single greatest contributor of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere.
85 million tons for industry.
140 years after we first started burning it for power, coal still powers the world. But thanks in part to coronavirus, things are changing.
Here in Britain, coal has been king for generations. Now behind me, right in the heart of London, this is the Battersea Power Station. At its peak, it was supplying the city with around 1/5 of its electricity.
But now, it's becoming luxury apartments. British coal is being dethroned, renewable power like offshore wind is taking over, and the pandemic looks like the nail in the coffin for the UK's last remaining coal plants.
Demand was so low during lockdown that all of Britain's coal-fired power plants were taken offline, and that led to an incredible record, more than 2 straight months without a single lump of coal being burned for electricity. Right here, where coal helped spark the Industrial Revolution.
In fact, demand for coal plunged worldwide, the biggest slump since World War II. In the US, renewables outpaced coal for the first time in centuries. Add that to our global lockdown, and total CO2 emissions fell 17%, the biggest drop in history. But it was just a drop in the bucket.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Corinne Le Carré led the biggest scientific study into what happened to our emissions under lockdown.
So 17% below 2019 emissions actually was the level of 2006. So it's not that far ago, and that just shows how much the emissions increased in such a short amount of time.
In other words, locking down 1/5 of the planet was only enough to take us back to the same level of just a few years ago.
Although the emissions did drop by 17%, we're still emitting 83% of the past year. So in order to tackle climate change, these emissions have to go down to zero. And we're a long way from zero now.
The thing is, CO2 emissions are already roaring back. Remember that 17% drop in emissions? Well, that's closer now to just 5%.
By itself, this does nothing to tackle climate change. It wasn't a decrease that is structural, and this is not going to change anything for climate.
We're getting further proof of that from China, where emissions in May were actually around 5% higher than last year. The fear is, as our streets get back to normal, our emissions will too, and climate scientists say that's something we can't afford. Because while we were focused on solving one crisis, the world's other emergency, climate change, wasn't getting any better. The Arctic was so hot, it was literally on fire. Deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon soared by 55% in the first 4 months of the year compared to the same period last year. Disposable plastic is everywhere again, a protector, but also a polluter. And critics say the looming economic recession became the perfect cover for some governments to roll back environmental regulations.
We're opening up our country again, our economy. It's going to come back very, very strong.
Gina McCarthy, we solemnly swear.
Gina McCarthy was the head of the Environmental Protection Agency under President Obama.
What is the Trump administration up to when it comes to the environment right now?
I guess my dad would say they're up to no good.
In just a few months, President Trump weakened a series of environmental protections, including suspending laws meant to punish industries for air pollution. The administration says it was about easing red tape during the pandemic.
I think it is fair to say that they are taking some of the biggest leaps forward to undo fundamental public health protections at this moment because we are so focused on a public health crisis, which is the coronavirus.
We're going to fill it right up to the top, saving the American taxpayer billions and billions of dollars, helping our oil industry.
How does Oklahoma feel about being petroleum-free? Not good.
That's what makes it so insidious and upsetting, is that you would expect that leadership at a time of crisis like this would hunker down and say, okay, how do we keep people most protected? And instead, you're seeing this administration rolling back fundamental protections, including protections of air pollution that make people more vulnerable to the impacts of COVID-19.
The EPA would not go on record in response, but the agency did tell us it completely rejects criticism that it's using coronavirus to roll back environmental protections. Even before the pandemic, scientists and students alike were telling us we were running out of time.
We want a future. Is that too much to ask?
Coronavirus has made their message even more urgent. In fact, experts say a climate tipping point might only be a few months away. That's because governments around the world will spend $9 trillion this year to rescue their economies. This scale of spending may never happen again, and the type of recovery they choose could lock in our path for the next 30 years.
The decisions they are going to make within the next 6 months will determine the future of energy system, and they have only 6 months to make the right decisions, to put the right energy policies in the recovery packages.
In some places, change is happening. In Europe, the EU just passed what it calls the biggest green stimulus in history, hundreds of billions to prioritize clean energy and transport. And some changes are all around us, in the way we work, what we eat, and how we travel. Coronavirus is even greening our cities, from New York to London, at least in the ways we look to socially distance.
The UK is one of several governments building miles and miles of new bike lanes, and part of the idea is that cycling is one of the safest ways to get around during a pandemic. But it's also really one of the most visible signs that our response to the coronavirus is paving the way for a greener future.
To change our course on climate, we'll need to think bigger. The world is rebuilding. The question is still, how? While the politicians battle it out, activists say the answer is clear. We can't go back to the way things used to be.
If your house fell down one day, you'd rebuild it, and you'd rebuild the things about it you love, but you wouldn't not fix the leaky roof or the drafty windows. You'd fix those things as you rebuilt the house.
So did COVID-19 help save the planet? No, it did not, but it still could.
What we need to do today is move forward together as a country and grab the future, like the United States has always done. Since when did we ever give up? And we can't do it here. I'm more hopeful than ever that we have solutions that will bring us to a healthier future, that will address climate change in the window that science demands.
Coronavirus was like a dress rehearsal for climate change, an invisible enemy, a worldwide threat demanding collective change. Can we apply the lessons we've learned to the other global emergency? The answer to that question will directly shape the future of the planet.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.